Mount Magnet was at one time a major mining hub, but over the years deposits have been worked out and most of the miners have moved on. Hill 50 Mine was once the deepest and richest underground operation in Australia. The town is still important as the geographic centre of the Murchison region and acts both as a supply and administrative hub. The best time to visit the area is during the cooler winter months, May to August, as the long hot summers can be very uncomfortable. In 1854, Robert Austin discovered a nearby hill that had magnetic properties. Austin promptly named it Mount Magnet. He also reported the likely presence of gold in the area, but due to labour shortages at the time, the authorities kept the information to themselves. The Aboriginal name for the area was Warramboo. In 1858, the area was explored by Trigg and Gregory, who once again reported the likely existence of gold. Their report was ignored just as Austin's had been. In 1879, the Watson family settled on Yowagabik Station and became the first pastoralists and graziers in the area. They were followed by the Jones family on Bugadi Station. It was 1888 before M.R. Burke lodged the first gold specimen from the Murchison. And it was he, not Austin, who was credited with making the discovery. George Woodley and Tom Sampry also found gold about the same time, but did not register their claim until 1891. Settlement began in 1892 after the gold had been discovered, and the town site was first gazetted in 1895. A man called Stedman was apparently looking for the swag of a prospector who had lost it when he was somewhat the worse for wear after a big drinking session. Stedman stumbled across a 2-ounce nugget of gold. He told his employer, Watson, who organised a search, and they turned up 200 ounces. The Murchison goldfields, covering some 32,000 square kilometres, was proclaimed in September 1891. In the first 11 months, 11,000 ounces of gold were extracted. By the time the railway arrived in 1896, the town was taking on a more solid and permanent appearance, and the area developed rapidly until 1905, when fortunes started to reverse. In 1902, there were 14 hotels in town, as well as 2 newspapers and 30 or more mines. Mining had declined by 1915, but there are still some mines working the area to this day. The following is taken from the book 20th Century Impressions of WA that was published in 1901. A wide upland plain is covered with mulga bushes and the occasional patches of saltbush. The aspect is dreary in the extreme, and in consequence of the insignificant annual rainfall, the red earth is generally bare. When gold was found at Payne's Find in 1911, a new track to Perth was opened up to the south. By 1920, motorcars had started to appear, and aeroplanes were starting to reduce the isolation of the bush. The introduction of the pedal radio set made life a bit easier and safer for those living in far-flung towns and stations. In fact, radio communications were so vital that they were still in use on Nadi Station right up to 1985. Mount Magnet has suffered the highs and lows of many outback towns. Wars, depressions, droughts all came and went, but after a revival in the 1960s, there was a crash in gold and wool prices during the 70s, and for a while it looked as though the town would be abandoned. Businesses closed and moved away, mines closed, and even the local hospital shut down. A few hardy souls kept the town going, and the 1980s saw a bit of a mining revival. This continued on into the next century. The price of gold soared, and in the space of 4 years, the town's population increased by 300%. There was an acute accommodation shortage, and it was common to see up to 50 caravans squatting on vacant land around the town. As we research information for our website, we come across all sorts of interesting little stories that we regard as folklore, Some are true, some aren't, but we like to try and include a little bit of that information both on our website and sometimes in these videos as well. So here's a little bit of the folklore of Mount Magnet. Flight Lieutenant John James Osmond, DFC, grew up in Mount Magnet. His father had served as a machine gunner in World War I and was taken prisoner. John joined the RAAF in World War II and flew with the Pathfinder Squadron. This was a particularly dangerous job, as the Pathfinders went on ahead of the main formation to drop flares onto the targets. This meant they were alone and heavily targeted by the flak guns below. It was said that on one occasion John's plane was caught by a number of searchlights, and in order to shake them off, he had to turn the plane upside down and dive with a full load of bombs on board. Eventually John's plane was shot down, but he survived, and like his father, became a prisoner of war. Unfortunately, after surviving the horrors of World War II, when he returned to his home, he was killed in a vehicle accident on his motorbike when he ran into a bug truck stuck in a creek on a dark night. He was just 24 years old. Our next little story is regarding a character known as Pretty Boy. Pretty Boy, whose real name has gone unrecorded, went on a bender, and when he ran out of money, he had a very bad case of the DTs. Locals saw him wandering down the street with a cigar in his mouth, but as he got closer, they realised it was actually a plug of dynamite with a fuse attached. As Pretty Boy proceeded to light the fuse, everyone in the vicinity dived for cover, and there was a loud bang, the result of which was Pretty Boy's body, minus its head, lying slumped across the path. Our next little story is about a character known as Mickey the Priest. Mickey the Priest, who was no priest at all, was a new chum on the goldfields near Lake Austin, and used to constantly pester the old-timers about where he could find gold. Eventually, they got tired of his continual questioning, so they pointed out a rocky outcrop that was known to be barren and told him to try there. Mickey didn't have the tools to break up the rocky outcrop, so instead he started to sink a drive next to the reef. Imagine the surprise of the old-timers when Mickey struck a rich lode that he eventually sold to an English consortium for quite a good price. Even with that bit of good luck, Mickey was not very wise with his good fortune and was seen sometime later working for wages at Sandstone.